So, Ben, back in 2020 was the first time we met, I believe, wasn't it? And it's been a little bit of a journey for us two since, and pretty amazing for us to be here today, shooting our first podcast actually together, the Guiding Light podcast. So, Ben, why are we doing this?
Thanks, Chris, for the introduction. We've decided to do this podcast to shine a light on recovery. Obviously, you've been a big part of my recovery, so no better person to do it with. To shine a light on addiction, mental health, and affected others of addiction or mental health, to really show that there is a form of recovery out there and people can get better and well.
Hi all, so here I am with Ben, and what we're going to do today is ask Ben a bit about his journey, how he got here today, so we can learn a bit about him and from him as well. I've certainly learned a lot from you, Ben, over the last few years, and it's been wonderful to see you become the person you are today over the kind of 3 years that I've known you. But there was a long time before that where I didn't know Ben. I've heard about it, but probably not everything. So I think let's take today as an opportunity for you to talk to me, but also to talk to our audience about who you are, how you've got here, what that journey is. So over to you, mate.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, for the introduction. As many of you know by now, my name is definitely still Ben. That was just a joke to get it going. What I wanted to do today was sort of share my story and hopefully help others, but to get the podcast up and going, making sure that everyone else feels comfortable with doing some stuff around mental health. So, what I would say about my journey is, all different people from all different backgrounds can become an addict or suffer mental health. So this is just my journey, and the recovery that I've got is my recovery, but there are many different avenues out there for recovery. So I can only share on my lived experience of how I got clean, but I'll start by going through my story and sort of, showing my background and where I come from and how I grew up into a young adult and then ultimately into recovery. So, the first sort of bit in my story really where I could sort of now looking back after doing some work on myself that I sort of identified being an addict was probably around 10 years old. I now know I suffer with bulimia, but at 10 years old, what I used to do is make myself be sick really, but I used to overeat, and then I used to make myself be sick because it changed the way I felt. So at 10 I felt really vulnerable, really scared, anxious of the world, and what I now realise, I use food and I use bulimia to change the way I felt because I was timid and scared and vulnerable inside. This happened way before I even put a drug into my system or anything, and I remember doing that in the school toilets. I used to have to run off at school. I used to eat 2 or 3 school dinners, and then I used to have to run into the toilet and make myself be sick to give myself high, to give myself an out. Because I just didn't know how to process my feelings. And, I struggled at school. I went through school and I really, really struggled going through my schooling. I've got dyslexia and I found learning very, very, very tough, as you know. For the next sort of 2 or 3 years, I've done mostly around food. But the obsession thinking for me, that I now know obsession thinking, I didn't know at the time. I used to collect these like football cards and I had to finish them off, all of them. And I used to search on the website where I could find them. And as soon as I finished them, I used to throw the book under the bed and start on to the next thing, move on to the next thing. What happened then throughout the process is I sort of took my first drug at 14, and that was alcohol, and that was actually at school. So a couple of the older children that I was knocking about with them, because I was quite a naughty child in school, I sort of tried to get kicked out of lessons and exclusion and things like that because I couldn't express the way that I felt. Apart from I just felt alone, weird and different. And what happened is I started drinking with some of the older people, and I remember feeling like I arrived. What happened is I took that first drink, and it was a can of K cider, It's quite strong. Didn't know that at the time. And I had a couple of cans at lunch, and it changed the way I felt. And what it done for me, it made me feel less vulnerable. It cleared up the soul problem. I didn't feel anxious of the world, and I could communicate. And I felt alive. I felt really alive. And it basically started from there, really. My addiction started from there, really, and that's the first sort of point of call that I can really talk about, where I put a substance in me. And over the next sort of 3 to 4 years, it was quite fun. I was quite a popular person at school, and I was often invited to, parties, events outside school, and then, slowly but surely, drinking was sort of becoming the culture, and as I sort of went through school and I was already hanging around with older people, it became more and more drink, very heavy binges of alcohol, and our first actual, class A drug was about 16 at one of these parties, and it was cocaine. And again, it was someone older that gave it to me. And I remember when I first took that drug, I thought, wow, all my problems had went. I felt alive. I felt I could communicate to others. And I absolutely loved it. I'm not going to lie. I loved taking drugs back then. And it made me feel free, made me really give me a freedom that I was looking for, and I went through the next sort of 4 to 5 years of really doing a lot of weekend binges. So yeah, like my era was like drum and bass and acid scene. So like we used to rig up these warehouses, sell these tickets, and basically do pills and drink and set up parties and promote them. And it wasn't too far from Hackney, and that went on for about 4 or 5 years, and it's where I met my first wife. And I really enjoyed it. What it done for me is it got me to speak to others. Everyone used to come to me for the drugs, and I was known as a bit of a party animal. So a lot of people wanted to sort of come to the parties, and after parties that went on after them on the Sunday nights when the party stopped, we went to someone's house or we carried it on, and I was really in my element. But by 22, I knew I had a problem, really. I was living with who turned out to be my wife. My daughter had just come along, and I remember saying before she was born that I was gonna give up drugs. And when she come along, I couldn't give up. I just couldn't give up at all. And I remember when she was born. So she actually gave birth in a pool birth, and I actually delivered her in the pool, but I couldn't get out of that hospital quick enough to wet the baby's head, shall we say. And I was gone missing for 3 days, and my partner at the time was in hospital for 3 days with this baby because the way that the birth was done, there was a tear and she needed to stay in, and I wasn't there. Drugs had taken hold of me at that point, and I just needed to be out there. And when I eventually come back to the hospital to take her home, I was hungover, not with it, living in anxiety, because I don't know if anyone knows, when you come down from drugs, it's quite a painful journey sometimes. And I'd convinced myself that I was going to give up, but I couldn't. And for the next 3 years, I can only describe as pretty dark, really, for me, because I wanted to give up. And I meant when I said I was going to give up, I meant when I said I wasn't going to use drink or drugs, I absolutely meant it. I wanted to not do it, but I couldn't stop. I just could not stop doing it. I didn't know what was wrong with me. And slowly but surely what happened is my using got more darker. Towards the end of that sort of 24, 25, I was using, then, the parties had stopped. I was using on my own. And my friends had stopped. I stopped taking self-care of myself. Inevitably, me and my partner split up, and it sounds awful, but when that happened, I remember sitting there thinking, yes, I've got no regulation. I've got no one looking at me. I can do what the hell I want. And I honestly believe that, like, my life was just about to start. That's how insidious this disease is. You know, I actually thought my life was going to start at this point. Um, and what happened, you know, in those 3 years, I got a new circle of friends, and I found harder drugs. I used to use drugs with my sister, as you know. And during that period, we were using quite hardcore drugs, and we both overdosed, as you know. Um, and she died, and I got brought back to life, and it was painful. It was really painful and dark for me, um, you know. And I look back at that, and it kept me captive for many years. And my drug using went at that point to harder drugs than cocaine, you know. And I eventually come street homeless. You know, I lost everything. You know, from a loving home, from a good upbringing, to a lot of friends, to the party animal. You know, I was on my own, on the streets, no job, not really caring what I was wearing, what I was doing, just to fund my habit. But I had a bit of a weakness during that period, and I ended up going to Narcotics Anonymous for the first time, for my first ever meeting. And you know, at that time it wasn't for me, but it did plant the seed. It did plant the seed for me to go in, and I found it very tough to go into a room, and I was broken. You know, I was really broken, but I still, at that point, looked at all the differences of what everyone was saying was different to me. They didn't do this, they didn't do that. I wasn't as bad as them. You know, reality of it is I was that geezer on the park bench. You know, and you know, I met my second partner during that period, and she also was, you know, living on the streets. You know, and we'd met during the raving scene, and we met back up street homeless, and we used together for many years. You know, and I felt my life was all right. Like that's the bizarre thing in this disease. I felt my life was okay. I was using heavy drugs, but managed to get my life back on track, and a little bit. And you know, so did she. And we managed to get a little flat somewhere. You know, but I went back to heavy using very quickly. For me, what happens is, you know, I can't do this alone, and when I think I can, you know, I thought it was self-will for a long time. I thought that my will could stop me using drugs. And I know that a lot of people probably think that as well. Is like they say, you know, why don't he just give up? The consequences are too big, or shouldn't he just have one? Or you think he'd do it for her, you know? And I thought that as well. Like I thought that I could just do this on my own. And I got a bit of clean time. I got about, I think it was about 4 months clean, and yeah, I didn't work a program. I wasn't going to any recovery meetings, and I wasn't really talking about my illness. You know, and what happened is I used. The problem is the problem is with me is I've got obsession thinking, and what happens is my default setting, and that is used, because I back myself into a corner. So when the going gets tough, or something crops up that isn't quite normal for me, what I end up doing is I have to use drugs without a program, because I have no other way. I have no other defense mechanism. You know, when something comes up in my life that may be small to others, because of the way that I feel things, I'm hypersensitive to feelings. You know, I have to use drugs to solve that problem. You know, it takes me back to that scared, vulnerable little boy that I was at 10 years old, of why I'd done the things around food, because I have no other defense mechanism. I can't seem to regulate my own thinking, you know. You know, it says in some of the work that I've done about restore to sanity, and I actually believe that has happened today. But you know, but I also didn't think I was insane when I was using drugs in that form. You know, I had to come to understand. You know, anyway, you know, what happened is I lost that partner, and the truth is, she left me to get clean, and she's done an amazing job on getting clean, and she stayed with me for a while she was clean as well. She was with me for 9 months, and eventually she said to me, she's got to leave me because I'm a danger to her recovery. That I now know that's the right thing, but at the time I was very resentful. Anyway, she left me, and she comes from the north, so she went back up to north. We didn't speak for a while. When she left me, I thought I'll come back to recovery, like we all do. Sometimes we get a big consequence in life, as you know. And what happens is we try and do something about it. And I sort of thought I'll give recovery another go. What happened is I went back to Narcotics Anonymous. And I tried to get clean, and I really tried to get clean. I wanted to get clean. I've absolutely tried to get clean, but I couldn't hear the message. I was so in the darkness, I couldn't hear the message. And I kept going to these meetings, and it just wasn't working for me. I kept using. I couldn't stop. It was on me 24 hours a day. And I was in such a dark place. I remember going to a meeting in London, and thankfully today some of them people are friends, but I was so broken, and so I was turning up using that I'd sit in chair, and I'd wet myself and not know that I've wet myself. I fell off the chairs in meetings. And I used to get put back on these chairs, and someone would say, keep coming back. And it used to infuriate me, and I didn't really know what was going on, and I was getting confusing messages, and I didn't understand any of the language, and I can't read at the best of times, and all this stuff's going on. But you know what? I kept coming back. And slowly but surely, I used less drugs to start. That's my journey. And I remember doing a tea commitment, and I spilt more tea over everyone else than I was, because I was using drugs. And they give you a tea commitment, for anyone who don't know, they give you a tea commitment in NA to keep you coming back, right? And I couldn't make no teas, and I was awful at it, but everyone said please, and everyone said thank you. And for the first time in my life, I actually felt all right. I felt that I was okay, and I was surrounded with people. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded with people that got me and understood me, and I didn't need to prove anything. They didn't want anything from me, and I was okay. I wasn't okay because I was using, but I was okay around them. I wasn't in danger of my life. I didn't feel intimidated by them. And I do in the world. The truth is, in the world, I feel intimidated. Even today, I feel scared of the world and what it has to offer. And I can get overwhelmed quite easily. Anyway, I got a bit of clean time through that. I got 8 months clean the second time round that I'm proud of. And it doesn't mean that I've lost that because I went back out, but what it done for me is it made sure that I knew where recovery was. But I went back out, and I went back out for 2 years. And during that time, for the first time, really, I started using heroin on a regular basis, and that's the drug that killed my sister. And I promised myself I'd never use that, but I did, and I overdosed again. And this story, as you know, but I was on the phone to my ex-partner, the one that left me for recovery, and she knew something was wrong, and she said, leave the door open, please leave the door open. And for whatever reason I did, and she got to me with 90 seconds left of my life, really, and she sprayed me with a thing called Neurocan that reverses the opioid drug, and gives you enough time to get an ambulance. And she sprayed me with that, and she saved my life. And I went to hospital, I got the help that I needed. But even then, I didn't think I was done. I weren't done. I wasn't done. That was a year before I come in this time, and I weren't done. I discharged myself from hospital and I went back using because I couldn't stop. The obsession of I couldn't stop, and I didn't have another way of life. My life got dark. My life was very dark. I wanted to kill myself. I wasn't brave enough. I wanted to die, but couldn't die. I used enough drugs that I thought would kill me. I kept waking up. I remember waking up most mornings going, not again. I'm here again. I've got to do this again. Because I didn't know any other way, but I didn't want to be here. Life was so painful. And I was using a lot of drugs, and you were there at the end, virtually right to the end, as you know my story. But I was sending you pictures of the drugs I was using and the blood and and the mess and the state that I was in. And that was my cry for help, really. I didn't know it then, but that was my cry for help. That was saying, Chris, help me, help me, help me. And I was ringing you every day, and I was trying to convince you that I didn't have a problem, and say that I'm not too bad. And, you really did see me through that period. And, I come into recovery. I used all night, as you know. My last use of Class A drugs on the 29th of May, but I called the 31st of May, 21, my clean time, because that's the first full 24 hours without a drug or drink in my system. So I class that as my clean day. What I can say is anyone that's still listening to the podcast, this is where the life gets better for me. And, I'm just so grateful to be in recovery today. What I forgot to mention as part of my drug using is I've done a couple of rehabs, and they normally what happens is you do a 14 or a 28-day detox, and then you do a program, and normally it's a 12-step fellowship program. I've done a couple of those previously, and they just didn't work for me, because what happened is, for me, is they take me out of society, and I can stop using drugs when I'm surrounded and I can't physically use, or I'm medicated. But when you put me back into society, that's the trigger for me, the scare for the world. So this time what I decided to do was I'd done a home detox. And my partner, that wishes to be named anonymous still, because that's the spiritual foundation of our program. She come down and see me through my first 7 days. And basically medicated me, like kept me sane. And I home detox, where I was urinating and pooing myself when I was asleep, because my body was detoxing and I couldn't eat solid foods. At the height of my using, I was I had a £1,500 a week habit and 2.5-3 litre bottle of vodka a day. And what my body was saying is, I've had enough. And I couldn't eat solid foods for the first month in recovery. I had to have these protein shakes, but she see me through that. She used to clean me for the first week until I got a bit stronger. And what I've done in that period is I started doing NA meetings, and first few days was by Zoom because I couldn't leave the house. But what happened this time is I heard the message. I heard 90 meetings in 90 days. If that's too much, do a meeting a day for 90 days. If that's too much, do a meeting a day and forget about the rest. Just come back tomorrow. I started doing these meetings, and I met my sponsor. He's my first sponsor. I've got a new sponsor today. I started doing some of the work, I picked up some service commitments, and all I can say is that first 6 months was horrendous for me. I wanted to use drugs. I wasn't lucky enough to, I hear some stories, I get a bit resentful about it. I hear some stories, they come in, they give up drugs and alcohol, and the obsession leaves them. That wasn't my story. What happened for me is I wanted to use drugs still, because I didn't have a solution. I didn't have a mechanism to stop. So what happened is I come in and I started doing these meetings, I picked up a sponsor and I started doing some work. And for the first time in my life, I admitted I was powerless over my addiction, and that was so powerful for me. And my life has become unmanageable, and it is step one, and I won't go through all the steps, but, that step for me saved my life, because I was never willing to admit that I was powerless over anything in my life, and I would never admit that my life was unmanageable, ever. And for the first time, I admitted that my life was unmanageable, and I'd done the work around that. And step two, restore me to sanity, because I needed restoring the sanity. I needed to understand that, using drugs behind a fridge freezer for 3 days on my own with the curtains shut is not normal behaviour. I didn't know any different. I lived in paranoid states. I used to, some of them I used to pull the fridge freezer out, and I used to climb over the back of it, and I used to use, crack and heroin for 3 days there. And I used to pull the wardrobe over my front door so no one could get in. And the thought process that I would go through is, if the police come in, they wouldn't know I was there. And I used to just sit there for 3 days using drugs. And, I thought that was normal. And I needed to be restored to sanity. And step three, and I'll leave it at the end of step three, but step three for me is, find a higher power that I choose to say is God, today. Because I need someone outside Ben, because my thinking uses drugs. I need someone that doesn't think like that, and get a support network. And since I've done those first 3 steps, and the others, but since I've done those 3 steps, my life's become unbelievably better. It's unrecognisable of where I was to where I am today. I've changed my friendship circle. And I am 909 days clean today.
Well done.
By doing this podcast, that I'm immensely proud of. I couldn't go 9 days for many, many years. It's not always been easy, and I want to share about that, actually. What I want to share about is recovery isn't easy. For anyone out there that needs help, mental health, recovery, or anything like that, this stuff isn't easy. But it's a damn sight easier than using drugs for me. Using drugs is exhausting. And, recovery for me, I've been through some real hard times in recovery. Recently, very recently, I've watched that partner that left me and then see me through recovery.
Go on, mate. It's not easy. It's not easy. But you were there.
She got a diagnosis late last year, and she got a diagnosis late last year, and she was terminally ill, and what recovery gave me was the ability to be there, like she was for me, and she died in September this year, and she was 5 years clean on the 10th of October, or she would have been, and that was the day that we buried her. But what recovery's given me, and it hasn't been easy, but my support networks allowed me to express anger, to talk about my feelings, and get through that period clean, And I didn't mention it at the start of of why we done the podcast, but that this is the biggest driver for me, because it says to me that you can get through anything. If you're an addict or you've got mental health issues, you can get through anything clean in life. If you choose the right path, and I reached out to you, I spoke to my sponsor, I spoke to my support network, I went to meetings, and I had the most loving end of life that she could have ever had. For anyone that is an addict, one of the things that hurts us is being alone and being isolated. And she said to me when she found out a diagnosis, "Don't let me die alone. I just don't want to die alone." And I got into bed with her the night she died, and I put her head on my chest, and I just cuddled her, and it just felt so real for me. And I'm proud that I managed to do that. And that's only because of recovery and the people like you in my life and the support network that I've got has got me through that clean, and it's the driving factor behind hiding the podcast because I want to share that stuff that you don't have to use no matter what. You're never alone in life. You're never alone. There's always someone there. You know, no matter where you reach out, someone will reach back. You know, whether that's a professional, whether that's the NHS, whether that's someone from fellowship, whether that's someone from you know, a support network, support group. There's many out there. There's not just NA. NA's my story, but there's many out there. You know, and I've got friends in many different organisations that's got clean. You know, and if you are suffering, I would recommend getting to one of those groups because that's worked for me. But yeah, you know, what recovery's also give me is the ability to dream. You know, I used to sit in my bedroom or on the streets or wherever using drugs and have these thoughts about where I want to be in 8 years' time, 10 years' time, 5 years' time. And just not have the ability to ever land anything, you know, live in fantasy. You know, I used to live in fantasy. What I can do now is I can dream and it can be a reality if I want it. I've got the ability to do it. I don't actually want a lot in life, but actually I can follow through with that. I can start to be a father, and I am being for the first time in my life. You know, I mentioned to you earlier, and it's a funny thing, you know, I've never paid bills on time or in full ever in my life until I found recovery. I've never been an adult. I never even knew that I had to pay bills. Like, I just thought, well, you know, give me it for free, or who's paying it, you know? I actually pay my bills on time today, you know, and I'm reliable. The biggest thing for me is about being reliable. You know, I used to make all these plans. I'll be here at this time. I'll do that. I'll attend that party. I'll attend that. I'll be there for you. You know, when the going got tough, I was never there. Now, when I say I'm going to be there, I'm there. You know, I'm reliable. You know, I'm a reliable person at work. I'm a reliable person at home. I'm a reliable person in friendships. I never wanted to be unreliable, but I had the ability to be reliable. And today I can, you know, I can be reliable.
You absolutely can, mate. And I want to jump in there and say thanks for sharing everything you've shared so far. And I know you as a reliable guy. You know, that's what I've known you as now. It's been 3 years, and for the last, year, I'd say you've been very reliable. Up until that point, maybe there was a few challenges still. And there's challenges every day, of course, but the things that you have done recently just show how reliable you are. I mean, I've spoken to people at your work. They talk about how reliable you are. I've spoken to people in your fellowship. I do different fellowships, but, you know, I know some of them, and they've spoken about how reliable you are. Not just reliable, honest as well. And I think that's so important. From that little boy who was 10 and had to eat in a certain way, run into the toilet, throw up, all that stuff to change how he felt, to the boy who was a few years older, 14, started drinking to cover that fear, to change how you felt, to the boy at 16 who started taking drugs and, like you said, enjoyed it for a while, but then, you know, like, it fell off the cliff. It wasn't about enjoyment. It was about just trying to get through life and trying to stop feeling anxious. You were always lying to yourself, to others, and now you don't. And that's the beauty of this stuff. Ben was always in there, but Ben was always scared. Now when Ben is scared, because you are scared, you told us earlier you're scared, you face up to it because you've got the people you can chat to. And it's a really wonderful thing, and I think that's definitely one of the things that recovery has given you. I mean, I think a few things that maybe we could chat about now. Isolation. You mentioned about isolation, and one of the things for me was when I was in my addictions and when I've had difficulties in depression, stuff like that, because of the challenges I've been through, I always found myself isolating and not wanting to ask for help, partly because I didn't know who to ask back in the day. I didn't know what I was really struggling with a lot of the time. And I felt like I didn't want to ask people because it made me look weak. I was wrong. Showing my vulnerability has been one of the best things that's happened. And actually, since me entering recovery, it's been about connection. It's been about being honest and talking to people in an honest way, but being connected to people. I was never connected to people who I felt understood my mind until I met people like yourself. So I moved from isolation into connection, into community, whether that be through fellowship meetings or whether that be through other peer support meetings or just actually talking to friends out there. I don't know, what's your experience of that? How do you feel about that difference between isolation and connection and how that's helped you?
Yeah, my experience, Chris, is similar to yours. You know, I am. What stopped me was very similar to you, but I didn't want to be judged. Really, was the main thing for me. So you know, isolation is signing my own death warrant because isolation on my own, you know, starts tapping into my stuff. Yeah, I'm still socially awkward, but again, what this program's given me for me is connection, and I can talk that through. With my sponsor or someone, you know, when I feel connected, I feel alive, and and my worries go away. Actually, my worries go away. So you're completely right. You know, this is about connections and relationships. For me, are the two things from out of isolation that you can get if you want it. You know,
And your partner, who you've spoken about, obviously, it's such a difficult thing, but that connection there is incredible. Like you say, she actually had to leave you when she was 9 months clean because it was dangerous for her at the time, which you understand now and I understand. But you were the person there at the end. And that is incredible in my mind. That really does show where we can get to. Because I, like you, have been in a place where I didn't want to be here anymore. I couldn't see any way of moving forward other than to not be here. But you know what you've done? You made that choice to be here. You went and got help. And not only that, you've changed. We've all changed. And you've changed so much that you managed to do one of the most incredible things, I think, which was to honour a promise, which was to be there with her at the end. And you did it in such a beautiful way. And although it was a really, really difficult time, I think also, and I think you'd agree with me, it was kind of beautiful the way it happened and the way it all ended, because that must have been a situation that neither of you really expected to be in.
yeah, you know, you're right. It's such a beautiful. The thing that I've got left for me is the beautiful act itself. You know, me and her sponsor was the two there at the end, and that will mean everything to her. You know, and just being able to honour my promise that I'll do it fills me up, and it gives me the drive that I've got today. And actually, it's given me a bit more freedom. I feel free. I feel that I've got the ability to do more. And you know, I'm grateful that I was able to do that. You know, I'm going away this Christmas with her ashes because it's what she wanted, and I'm going to go and sprinkle them, and that's the final part of that journey. You know, and again, the recovery's just given me the ability to do that and honour it. You know, and honour to her family. You know, I was there. You know, I was there for her family as well for that. And I still talk to her parents and her brother, and you know, they're fond of me and I'm fond of them. That's something I didn't have an addiction, you know, that I've got in recovery. I've got that relationship, and yeah, we can share the fun times. We have a little bit of a joke, you know. Songs come on the radio, you know, that remind us. Quite often I text them, you know. Our brother's quite good at poetry. He often sends me a poem and things. But it's just so beautiful, as you mentioned. It's just so beautiful for me to be able to do that. And, you know, I'm just grateful, really.
Definitely, definitely. And something you just mentioned there was about the poetry that her brother writes. And that takes me back to thinking about something that you've done on a couple of occasions. And that's writing letters about yourself, writing letters to your addiction and things like that. I remember quite early on when I first met you, we were on an online meeting together and somebody read something, a letter of their own. And you basically took it away and said, that's something I'm going to do. But I know you've done some stuff since then as well. So I don't know if you'd like to chat about that, how that's helped you.
Yeah, look, you know, one of the things when I was in rehab, they tell you to write a goodbye letter to your former self as like a stop in the ground. And I never really done it, but as you said, we was on a meeting a few years ago, and the woman shared such a powerful story. And she read that letter out, and it just ticked the boxes for me. And this time round, when I come in, I remember writing a letter, I sent it to you. It was still quite dark, that letter at that time, but it was really poignant. And what it does for me is it gets it out of myself and puts it on paper, and really gives me strength. It gives me absolute strength. I do a lot of journaling as well, but it gives me the strength to get through the day and through the week. And it sees my past life because I've put some stuff in there about what happens when I use drugs. And very recently, I've wrote another letter, as you know. At 2 years clean, I wrote another letter, and they're not identical letters, because this one's from a place of gratitude.
Yeah.
Unbelievable grateful for what it's given me, and what the fellowship's given me. You know, I don't speak about that enough. I talk about NA, but I don't talk about the fellowship. You know, last night I went to a charity event, and then I went out for an activity with other addicts. I'm still pretty bad at golf, as it turns out, but you know, I enjoyed myself and connected. I connected again with others. And it was just such a great evening, you know, something that's far away from where I was when I was back then. Far away.
It's quite incredible, isn't it? Because I remember when I was about to stop drinking, wanting to stop drinking, I wanted to stop for ages. I felt terrible. You know, it wasn't enjoyable anymore like it was in the early days, but I was so scared to have a life without it. I didn't know how I would move forward, how I would cope. Well, these days, life is amazing, and I do so much without the drink. So much. I have so much fun. I'm more fun, I think. And so it's really nice to hear what you said there, because I do think when coming into recovery, one of those real challenges is, how am I going to live without this? Am I going to be boring? All that kind of stuff, which I've heard a lot from others and I've said to others. But it turns out that it's not the case at all. There is so much good stuff you can do, and you're living proof of that yesterday, off playing golf and stuff, and just having fun. You know, we have a lot of fun, don't we? And it's beautiful.
Yeah, again, like, you know, there's so many things that are identical. You know, I thought, how am I going to get through my first birthday? How am I going to get through a wedding? How am I going to get through a funeral? How am I going to get through Christmas? You know, and for me, that's about my disease telling me that I can't to use or drink, you know, but I know I can. You know, I'm coming up to my third Christmas. You know, that first Christmas, as you know, was tough for me. A lot of alcohol around Christmases, you know, but yeah, you know, I connect. There's meetings all the time, you know, powerful fellowship that there's always someone there. Like 2 o'clock in the morning, I know there's someone in my phone book that'll answer.
Yeah, no, that's it. And there's always somebody there who can help if you need it and if you want it. But equally, I like what you said there is, how am I going to get through Christmas? How do I get through a birthday? How do I get through a wedding? Whereas it gets to that point, certainly for me at the moment, it's like, can't wait for this wedding. Do you know what I mean? It's not about getting through anymore. It's about having fun. I can't wait for that birthday. I'm looking forward to that holiday, because these are all challenges that we have to overcome. Once we overcome them, they can just become a great part of life again. And I think that's the beauty. Once you get in recovery, it's about that change and that enjoyment, and realising that there's a beautiful life out there that we didn't know about because we were living in that addiction. But one thing I did just want to jump onto as well is maybe when you were talking about your relapse there, and you said about sending me photographs and stuff and being on phone calls, that was a scary time for you, I'm sure. It's a scary time for me, because I was that friend on the end of a phone listening to somebody who at that point was screaming out for help but didn't quite know how to ask for it. And, well, you know what it's like. I was on a field that day, and after a number of days you phoning me, and I basically said, Ben, you got to go and get clean. Don't phone me till you haven't used for 3 days, I think it was that I said. And that was the hardest thing probably that I've ever had to do with anybody else in recovery, because I didn't know if I'd ever talk to you again. I was genuinely petrified, but I also felt that if I didn't say that to you, you may not get the message. I didn't know if I did the right thing at the time or not. You're sitting there, so I think maybe it was the right call. But how did that work? How did that make you feel? Was it the right thing? Was it the wrong thing? I don't know.
You know, initially I was in anger, but I know that another addict rang me as well to check in on me, because you'd already spoke to someone else saying, "Can you check in?" But after I used that night, you know, I was using when I was phoning you, and I used that night, and then it gave me the kick up the rear end, really, Chris, is the truth. I thought this guy cares about me to do that. And I care about myself. For the first time in my life, I cared about myself for a little bit. It was like an elastic band had broken for once, and I was done. I was defeated. And it gave me the kick up the rear end to come in. And I remember ringing you on day 4, actually, and it was such a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I honestly believe that time that I knew I was done. You can never say you're done as an addict. That is the scary thing. You never can say you're done, but I'm as far away from a use now as I was then. I was completely done and broken. I'd exhausted every avenue, really. And from the pictures and the videos.
Absolutely. And crikey, when I got that phone call, it was one heck of a relief, I tell you. It really, really was, because I genuinely didn't know if I'd ever get it. So thanks for calling. Thanks for getting clean, and thanks for calling. You did it for you, not for me. I know that. That's how we work, innit? We have to do it for ourselves. But I tell you what, it was incredible to get that phone call. Should we talk a little bit about you now? What's happening? What's going on? Because do you know what? I know you've spoken about all the addiction stuff and getting to where you're at, but what a guy. I first met you and you didn't have a job. Now you've got a job. You're doing really well. You've been through a few jobs. You've been through some difficulties. And how do you live with that day to day? How do you get through challenges at work and things like that? Because it isn't just challenges at home these days, is it? It's challenges within life, which everyone has and everyone lives with. How do you overcome those things while working a recovery program?
I think anyone that works for me, Chris, will say that I can be difficult still. I'm not going to deny that. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to my company, actually. For anyone that watches the podcast that know me, I've been through a journey with them as well. And, they've stuck by me, and they actually give me the resource to get clean and to be myself, express myself, actually that allows me to bring my strengths out. But, one thing being an addict gives you is resilience.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important for a workplace to understand that not all addicts means weakness, it actually means strength. Actually, if you can get clean, that's some of the best employees that you can get, because we're resilient. They have to be, because we beat ourselves up time and time again. But it's also been able to give me a really good style of leadership. I'm really open with the team. I'm really honest with the team. And I allow freedom to make their own decisions and talk up. We've really built a good culture of being able to express ourselves, and that's really important for me. And the results that are coming through that business, they're phenomenal. And I think everyone in the business would agree that. But it's driven by me, but by the team, because they've come on board to that understanding. And there's some challenges ahead. We're still a growing business, and there's some challenges ahead, but I'm excited for them. That's the difference with recovery. The challenges that it gives me a day, I don't look as doom. I look at positive. That's one of the biggest mind changes. I take from negative to positive. But yeah, it's just, I'm just grateful to them, but I'm also grateful to myself that I can lead in the way. I feel that I've got the freedom to lead in the way that I want to. I become a director this year in that business, and it's the biggest single thing I've ever done for myself, really. And I made a commitment to myself then that I would lead in the way that I wasn't going to change. I was going to lead in the way that I wanted to. And I'm grateful that I'm sticking for that. We're coming up to Christmas. We've got a great next year. We've got a busy next year. But I've got a great team that work with me. And for other companies out there, that may have got employees that are struggling and that, I'd say stick by them, give them a helping hand. Reality is not all people are going to find recovery, and that's the sad reality, but try and help them, try and understand them a little bit. Some of the behaviour stuff, I don't mean some of the way I behave. And I'm still learning with some of the way that I behave. It isn't me, but it's just my default setting of where I've come from and why I behave in the way that I do. Some people may look at that as disruptive, for argument's sake. It's not meant to be disruptive. but I look at solutions. So I want to get to solutions. So I become disruptive because I'm excited to move forward. I'm challenging because I want the business to do better and I want the individuals to do better. I have one of the sayings now around confrontation is a loving act. Because when you confronted me that day, that was coming from love. You wanted to confront my illness head on, and you did, and I've got clean. When I'm confronting people in a way that I'm challenging them, I'm doing it because I want to get them better. The easy thing to do is not do that and let them carry on making the same mistake or not improving their career. But I want to be challenging, and I also want to be challenged. I get off on being challenged because I want to do better for myself and for the company, and that's what the challenges at work. So one of the biggest things we've done is become a people-focused business. And what that's allowed us to do, again, is drive performance and also recruit well. We've recruited well into the business because of our values externally, and because of what people see that we're doing. They want to join. It's not just a job.
Yeah, definitely. And when I told my work about my challenges, I'll call them, so my alcohol dependence and the recovery from that, my gambling addiction and recovery from that, I didn't tell them for 2 years after I became clean. And it was the best thing that I did, because suddenly I could be myself at work, bring my full self to work, be totally honest. And then obviously 3 or 4 years after that, can't do the maths right now, but my ADHD as well, which I've then spoken to them about. And it's nice because I feel like I'm on a journey at work where we learn together to get me through the challenges, but also actually me then going to work and talking about this wider in the workplace to talk about well-being and stuff like that. But I think what might be a nice way to just finish this part of the conversation is I remember you a few years ago going into a meeting and you phoned me up after and said, I just did something a bit mad, and you had done a presentation. Just want to say what you did there because I absolutely loved it.
I forgot how long I was clean, but it's probably about 9 months, I think, somewhere around that. And I was doing a presentation to some of the people that I still work with now. And the last page basically was, I'm an addict. And I'm proud of it, and because I am.
Yeah,
I am proud. It's something to be proud of. When I say addict, there's a active addict and there's a non-using addict. I'm proud to be a non-using addict, and I think it gives me skills that not everyone can get. Because they're unique. They are unique because of the past. Your skills are unique because you've got trauma and you've got different things that some people just never experience. So they can't talk, they don't understand. We addicts, have got some things in the locker that are unique to us. And it was a bit mad, but I'm proud I've done it and glad I've done it actually as well.
You should be proud, and I think it was a very good choice. And I guess, brilliant, Ben. Just as we're about to finish off, is there anything else you want to quickly mention about your journey to date, or you're happy to leave that for another day?
When me and my partner were street homeless for that period of time in our life, I remember one instance, and it's more about my feeling really rather than the act. But I was, we're sleeping in sleeping bags, and this group of lads come out from the pub. It's like on a Bankman station. I was in Charing Cross station, and this group of lads had come out from the pub. There's a big hill there, and they'd gone into Charing Cross station, and a guy urinated on me. And I was so dark in my life, I felt that was acceptable and okay. I didn't actually feel anything. When I was obviously, higher, but I didn't actually feel anything. I felt that it was acceptable and okay. And that's the scary fact. I look back now and I've done some work around that. There's a bit of a shame and some guilt around that, but and there's some embarrassment. That was one of the biggest things why I was using. The other thing is around. Going to a food bank or a homeless shelter to get a hot meal is it's quite embarrassing, really. Or I found it embarrassing. I don't today. I did then. I found it a shame. It stopped me going. It stopped me getting well. It stopped me going to those places to better myself or to even find help, because I was such ashamed about it. but I did eventually, obviously, needs must, and I went, and I got a few NA leaflets, but if you're ever in that position, go reach out. Reach out. There is no judgment there. Actually, there is no judgment, and I'm just grateful for the people there that supply that service. Because I was in that need, and I'm grateful that I got a hot meal.
Absolutely, mate. And I think you've hit the nail on the head there as well with regards to that judgment. Sometimes in the world there is judgment, but actually a lot of it we bring on ourselves. There is stigma around some of this stuff, and that's another reason why me and you are here today talking, because we don't believe there should be. We want people to go and ask for that help, and do you know why? Because there's people there who want to be asked to give that help as well. So spot on, mate. Ben, thank you so much for sharing all that today. It's been lovely to sit here with you and record our first episode of the podcast, and I'm sure all of the listeners will be really thankful for what you've shared. But is there one final thing you'd like to let the listeners know, and maybe let them know where they can hear us and find out a little bit more about us?
Yes, thanks, Chris. What I would say is, for anyone that's listening, you're never alone with mental health. Always reach out. There are many organisations. You can also reach out to us. We're active on LinkedIn under the Guiding Light podcast. We're also currently on Twitter under Guiding Light podcast, and also we'll be on the normal channels: Spotify, Anchor, Apple. So if you want to reach out there, please subscribe. We have got a website as well. It's called theguidinglightpodcast.co.uk. So reach out there as well.
As we wrap up another amazing and inspiring episode of The Guiding Light, remember, although your journey is unique, you most certainly are not alone. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to explore, reach out please across our socials or via our website www.theguidinglight.co.uk. Until next time, take care of yourself.